It's like what the issue in my mind is this is like when we talk about erosion of the commons, privatization of the commons for private gain through deception and consumption of the commons is the question. That is the issue that we're trying to address here, it seems, in the modification of the law. Is that fair?
Well, again, you have the want to turn a multi-dimensional argument into a monodimensional argument for simplicity's sake. I would say that the success of the competitive value of the West is observed at the abstract as our ability to create non-consumed commons. In other words, to capitalize in the form of commons, and this is the way of reducing costs for all. So that's the purpose of our method, is that instead of redistribution, which increases consumption at the cost of capitalization and commons, the purpose of commons is to reduce costs, limiting our need for income. So now you have to say, well, how do we get to the point where we've produced commons? Well, that's due to our group evolutionary strategy, which is reducible to, what I said in sovereignty, reciprocity, truth, before face. So the problem I'm trying to solve at the basic level is that the West developed for reasons that we know for perfectly well, a ritualization of war as a conflict between elites, kings, and that we gradually domesticated war to the point where we've even got human rights. We've invented human rights. The problem is that the enemy didn't domesticate war by the same means, and they used the female method of warfare, which is undermining, by attacking not attacking people or leaders, or even capital itself, but in other words, fixed capital, hard capital. So not people, not populations, not trade routes, not hard capital, but they did it on the institutions of cultural production that produce our behavioral capital.
Right.
So how do we eliminate the ability or domesticate the ability to conduct war by female means, and therefore restore, end the war against our civilization, our people, and our genetics? And the answer is that we have to increase the scope of our law, understand our law, and then increase the scope of our law so that we use the market as a means of suppressing that kind of warfare internally, just like we use the military as a means of suppressing the market for warfare externally.
Yep.
And so in the primary function here is to eliminate what we would call ignorance, error, bias, and deceit in general, in other words, complete, and then moreover to eliminate the specific strategy of false promises baiting into hazard that are the core of the Abrahamic cults, whether they are the old world or the new world. They are means by which this has been sold. And so whether we talk about Judaism, Christianity, Islam as means of undermining civilizations, or we talk about Marxism, postmodernism, feminism, and woke as a means of undermining civilizations. These are both false promises, and the only difference is that they combine sophistry with either supernatural magic, right, a supernatural cult, or supernormal pseudoscience. And so that's the only difference. So that's the primary issue, is to set up and reconfigure the system so that people cannot conduct total war against us because of our ignorance of our domestication of warfare on one hand, and our ignorance of the reason for our success on the other. The primary obstacle being that the natural law of the universe requires we maintain natural selection, and the only peaceful means and the only kind means of maintaining natural selection is empirical, and the only empirical method is to not pay for is to constrain the reproduction of those unfit to participate in the markets, for the spectrum of markets we call our civilization. So that's what I'm trying to accomplish, and in that sense, it's a lot of work to explain how to prohibit lying.
How to what?
Prohibit lying.
Yes.
I mean, in other words, the core of the work is testimonialism. So that's what we're trying to accomplish is that we have no Bible, so to speak,
Right.
and that's because we didn't develop monopoly, like authoritarian monopoly, like the Jews, Christians, and Muslims did. We maintained trifunctionalism, and so the way to get out of this, so you have to create a system of organization. In other words, we need a Bible,
Right.
and a Bible that is honestly, if you look at constitutionalists, they treat the Constitution as a Bible. They put it ahead of Christianity, and that's the right way to look at it. So Christianity is a way of surviving the Bible that's the Constitution. I'm trying to turn that into a Bible that explains it completely, totally, as science down to the nit, so that our civilization has a way of surviving into eternally, and so that we're no longer subject to this. And as far as I know, by completing the sciences, it's the end fucking point of everything. So that's my goal. The problem is that people are not very bright in the first place. We have a left-wing cult, which is just communism.
Madness. Just madness.
We have a Christian cult that's only not communist because communist is because the communists are atheists. We have a constitutional cult, which is what is basically the nationalists. And we have a fascist cult, which is basically the militaristic males, right? And so we have this set of cults. And so each of these cults operates on a system of argument that justifies their moral intuitions.
Right.
And so each of these cults has a specific religion, ideology, and dogma that justify their instincts. And so the problem is that the feminine cult is larger and has better incentives in place than the masculine cult, which is the middle, which is the spectrum. And so what happens on the right is that everybody wants fundamentalists or a soft Christian or a constitutional or a fascist, whatever. I mean, it probably goes the other way with fascist, then religious, then constitutional method, or white nationalist method. And they have lost faith in the Constitution, or they've lost faith in the courts, because they, for some reason, think it's the government's and the courts' jobs to protect their rights, rather than the courts, the law, if adequately expressed, are the cheap means by which we regulate the abuse of our rights from getting out of hand sufficiently that we have to act with force.